All right, I want to bring in CTV's political commentator, Scott Reid. Scott, good morning. Good to see you. We spoke yesterday at this time. We were talking about what a win or a lose would look like from Carney. What was your takeaway from the meeting yesterday in the Oval and beyond?
Clearly passed the first test, but I think all of us watching, and you and I were watching it live, lots of others, you certainly felt this sense of anxiety that almost anything could happen. And what a weird and wild way to run the global economy, isn't it? Everyone says, oh, well, he's going to be sitting down next to the president. Will the president go off like a rocket? Will he reach over and try to physically dominate him? Will he be respectful? Will he ramble and wander off like he did? But by and large, look, as odd and as strange as this setting was, it was a respectful encounter. Mark Carney was confronted with the question of the 51st state, handled it shrewdly, cleverly. President decided not to turn that into a confrontation. And so there you have it. Now we're into a world of engagement. This first date has been passed. And, what a weird first date it must have been for Mark Carney.
Yeah, and despite, the fact that they sat there for, I think, almost a half an hour before Carney was really meaningfully brought into the conversation, it was Carney who really got the line of the day by telling Trump, Canada is not for sale. There's some pieces of real estate, Donald, that, Mr. President, that are not for sale, and Canada's not one of them. So what do you then think will be the message that the Prime Minister will take to the premiers today when he talks to them about where things go?
Well, there's something the rest of us don't know. We know what we witnessed there in terms of how, as you say, he shrewdly managed and sort of struck the line between flattering but also being firm with the president, using the real estate analogy to butter him up, but making it crystal clear that Canada is not for sale. So that's what we saw. What we didn't see was the working luncheon. And what we don't know is whether we are inching toward quiet progress on trying to engage on a series of, sort of almost working tables, like not to get boring and processing, but that's where the real need arises. Are we going to start to have genuine discussions with officials on trade, on key sectors, on what we're going to do in terms of shared security and defense? Think about the North and the link to critical minerals in the Arctic. So I think he's going to be talking a little bit more candidly with the premiers about where he thinks next steps are. And I think there'll be an interesting dynamic at that premiers table. We saw Doug Ford take a hard shot at Premier Daniel Smith from Alberta yesterday, saying that we do not need to be ununited at this moment, that we shouldn't be talking about separatism. And then Premier Smith fired right back and said, I don't tell him how to run Ontario. So what's the dynamic going to be? I think that Premier Smith may find herself isolated around that table, as most of the premiers say, listen, we have a collective interest in trying to manage this relationship at this moment of crisis. So I'll be watching for that as well.
All right, I'm glad you brought that point up about Premier Ford. So we also learned yesterday that Trump will attend the meeting, the G7 meeting. The last one here in Canada back in 2018 did not go well. What are your thoughts around that next meeting between Carney and Trump?
Oh, be careful what you say after the meeting. That's for darn sure. When, Prime Minister Trudeau kind of dunked on Donald Trump after the meeting broke up, and that was the beginning of the deterioration of their relationship. I'm so sure that Prime Minister Trudeau, by the way, should have taken as much flack as he did for it. He said something that had been said many times, but for whatever reason, the irrational bear that is Donald Trump took great offense. And so I think you'll see a lot more care when it comes to preparation to communicate what the public discussion is. Again, Carney's got that sort of mild, straight ahead, unexcited manner, which I think, suits one-on-one dealings, collective dealings with Donald Trump. So, we'll see what happens in the G7 in terms of agenda. And I'll be looking in particular to see how that overlaps with Canada's specific bilateral agenda. So will we get some talk of trade normalization? By that time, 2 months from now, will Donald Trump be in more of a mood to be looking for deal and to be bringing the temperature down? Because let's face it, his polling numbers are down, confidence in his management of the economy is down, and jobs and growth and trade are down, all under his watch in the first 100 days. That's not what he got elected to do. So maybe by June, he'll be a little bit easier to deal with and a little more friendly to making things actually work productively.
Yeah, I think it's been, what, a month since Liberation Day, and no new deals have been announced. So, Scott, thanks, as always. Really appreciate seeing you again this morning.